Imagine a place where fossils actually rain from cave ceilings, where a lake once exploded with methane, and where there is more fresh water bursting from underground than anywhere else on Earth. It sounds completely fake. These are real Florida extremes. The ground beneath your feet hides even weirder truths. So what does it take to live on a giant limestone sponge that dissolves and collapses without warning? Let us start at the very bottom. Start digging into the ground anywhere in Florida, and you are not just moving dirt, you are tunneling into the remains of an ancient sea. 25 million years ago, the entire state was nothing but a shallow tropical reef. Over time, layer upon layer of coral, shells, and marine life compressed into a thick bed of limestone, stretching hundreds of miles beneath the surface. This limestone is not solid like granite. It is riddled with tiny holes and cracks, making Florida's foundation more like a giant waterlogged sponge than a rock. Rainwater, slightly acidic from absorbing carbon dioxide in the air, seeps down and dissolves the limestone grain by grain. The process is slow but relentless. Over millions of years, it carves out hidden passageways, vast underground chambers, and deep sinkholes. This is what geologists call karst, a landscape formed by water eating away at soluble rock. It is the reason Florida is home to more springs than anywhere else on Earth, and why the ground can collapse with almost no warning. In places like Devil's Den and Blue Grotto, the ceiling itself is a cross-section of lost worlds. Fossils of ancient sea biscuits, sand dollars, and even the bones of Ice Age giants are trapped in the stone. Sometimes a chunk of ceiling breaks loose, and these relics tumble down through the water like prehistoric rain. The ground that seems so ordinary above is actually a gateway to a sunken forest of the past, shaped by a chemistry experiment that has been running for tens of millions of years. 50,000 years ago, a forest of giant cypress trees stood where the Gulf of Mexico now rolls. Their trunks, as wide as cars, vanished beneath the waves as the Ice Age thawed and sea levels surged. In 2012, diver Ben Raines stumbled onto this lost world off Sarasota. The trees, perfectly preserved in the dark, low-oxygen water, still hold their bark in rings, a time capsule older than the pyramids. Scientists raced to study the site before loggers could claim the ancient timber, sparking fierce debate over whether the forest should be protected or harvested. Beneath Florida's surface, the real labyrinth is mapped by explorers like Jill Heinerth. She has spent years threading through the Waukulla Leon Sinks cave network, a submerged maze stretching 87 miles, one of the longest underwater cave systems on the planet. Heinerth describes passages so tight that a single misplaced fin can cloud the water in total darkness, turning a scientific mission into a life-or-death crawl. In these hidden corridors, fossils from the Ice Age still cling to the ceilings, sometimes dropping loose as divers pass by. But not all of Florida's secrets stay buried. The same water that carves these caves can turn on the people above. Every year, around 6,500 insurance claims are filed for sinkholes with homes, roads, and even swimming pools swallowed by the ground without warning. For residents, Florida's ancient geology is not just a curiosity. It is a daily gamble where the past can literally open up beneath your feet. In South Florida, prehistoric monsters still share the same backyard. Nowhere else in the world do American alligators and American crocodiles live side by side in the wild. Crocodiles prefer brackish coastal mangroves, while alligators stick to freshwater swamps and lakes. But in places like Everglades National Park, their territories overlap, and you can spot both species sunning themselves on the same muddy banks, sometimes just yards apart. The only thing separating them is a taste for saltwater and a few million years of evolution. After sunset, a different kind of glow takes over. Along stretches of the Indian River Lagoon and Mosquito Lagoon, the water lights up electric blue with every paddle stroke or splash. This is not a trick of the moon. It is bioluminescence, created by millions of tiny plankton called dinoflagellates. When disturbed, these single-celled organisms trigger a chemical reaction involving luciferin, the same molecule that makes fireflies glow. The result is a living light show with fish leaving glowing trails and kayakers surrounded by shimmering halos. In Florida, even the darkness is alive with surprises. Every winter, hundreds of manatees drift into the warm water outflows of Florida's power plants, huddling together in slow-motion clusters that locals call the Manatee Motel. The water here stays a steady 72 degrees, even when the Gulf turns cold. Without these artificial hot tubs, many manatees would not survive the chill. It is a strange twist. One of Florida's most iconic wild creatures now depends on the hum of nuclear turbines to stay alive. Just offshore, the only living barrier reef in the continental United States stretches along the Florida Keys. This reef is a rare survivor, battered by storms and bleaching events and shrinking every year. Marine biologists warn that if this reef were anywhere else, it would be a protected wonder of the world. Its coral towers shelter everything from neon parrotfish to the last wild elkhorn coral in the country. On the beaches near Venice, ancient shark teeth from the age of the megalodon wash up with every tide. Beachcombers sift through the sand for black triangles, some as big as a child's hand, left behind by sharks that swam these waters millions of years ago. Florida's barrier islands never stay still. Driven by waves and storms, they can migrate up to 5 meters a year, swallowing roads and reshaping the shoreline. Cape San Blas, for example, has retreated so quickly that houses built a decade ago now stand in the surf. The coast here is not a fixed line, it is a living, moving edge, always rewriting the map. Miami Beach, the iconic strip of pastel hotels and palm trees, is almost entirely man-made. In the early 1900s, developers like Carl Fisher looked at mosquito-ridden sandbars offshore and saw a blank canvas. They dredged up millions of tons of sand from the bay, mixing it with trash and debris to create new land where there had only been shallow water. Star Island, Fisher Island, and Dodge Island all rose from this recipe. Layers of bay mud, construction waste, and whatever else the dredges could grab. Today, these islands are home to some of the most expensive real estate in the country, but their foundations are anything but solid. Keeping these beaches from washing away is a never-ending battle. Miami Beach alone spends tens of millions of dollars every year trucking in fresh sand to replace what the waves steal back. The process, called beach nourishment, is a temporary fix. Storms and tides can erase months of work overnight. Some years the city runs out of nearby sand entirely and has to import it from as far away as the Bahamas. Underneath the sunbathers and lifeguard stands, the ground is always shifting, held together by engineering, money, and hope. Entire neighborhoods in South Florida now find themselves underwater, not from hurricanes, but from the return of the wetlands they were built on. In Miami-Dade, areas that were drained for suburbs are experiencing chronic flooding as sea levels rise and groundwater pushes back through the porous limestone. Some homes flood on sunny days, with water bubbling up through lawns and streets. Since the 1990s, these so-called ghost floods have become routine, costing hundreds of millions in property damage and emergency pump repairs every year. In the western Everglades, thousands of acres of former sugarcane fields have been deliberately reflooded as part of the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan known as SERP. Authorized by Congress in 2000 with a $16 billion price tag, SERP is the largest environmental restoration effort in the world, aiming to reverse a century of drainage and bring water back to 500,000 acres of lost wetlands, even if it means flooding farmland and nearby towns. Meanwhile, Miami is sinking up to 8 centimeters a year in some spots, a slow-motion collapse fueled by overdevelopment and the relentless pull of gravity on soft, compacted ground. While the earth below is giving way, the sky above is just as wild. The stretch between Tampa and Orlando is known as Lightning Alley, with more than 20 lightning strikes per square mile every year, more than anywhere else in North America. Off the Florida Keys, scientists live and work in the Aquarius Reef Base, the world's only undersea research lab, studying the ocean's future from a habitat 60 feet beneath the waves. In Florida, the threats come from every direction: water rising up, land sinking down, storms firing from the sky, and the sea itself creeping in. Florida isn't just wild. It is a living experiment, shaped by forces still unfolding beneath our feet. With half the state threatened by sea level rise and sinkholes accelerating, what seems impossible here often becomes reality. The question is, are we ready for Florida's next unbelievable twist? Share your thoughts below.